Mass surveillance in the United States dates back to post-World War I era, where communication monitoring and censorship came into play. Following into World War II, technology kept on advancing, and new forms of mass surveillance began to erupt. Law enforcement agencies based around secret intelligence were created, examples being the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and the National Security Agency, the NSA. Surveillance methods by government have and will continue to grow. Efforts peaked post 9/11 when security became a priority, and some constitutional rules were even ignored to enforce it better.
Government has many different ways in which they can track and look over citizens. There are non-technological ways such as having access to postal mail or border control at airports. However, some argue that the most invasive forms of mass surveillance come from the government's use of technology. The government has access to many types of technological surveillance techniques, most in which are extremely hard to catch because it is technological or silent tracking. Some of these techniques include financial tracking, the government's ability to search and retrieve information from banks and credit card companies, data search and data storage, the government's ability to basically search any database and have access to information, even if it's private. The best example of this is the story that Professor told about the client she had working as an ACLU attorney. Her client had been stopped by the airport because the government had been reading her emails with a friend for over a year. The government believed that suspicious information had been being passed back and forth to someone outside the United States. However, it ended up being just a giant invasion of privacy. Another controversial use of technology used for surveillance is wiretapping. Billions of dollars are spent each year in order for the government to be able to tap into phone calls and messages. This is an especially growing method due to the prevalence of smartphones used in the United States today. Smartphones are filled with personal data that are very easy for anyone to gain access to. Although so many more methods of technological surveillance, the last method we're going to talk about today is by far the most controversial, which is drone surveillance. Drones are classified as unmanned aerial systems, or UAS controls, and are mostly used by law enforcement to monitor using live video, heat sensors, infrared cameras, and so much more. These drones are programmed to fly in the air and surveil what's below and above. Some people think that surveilling in this way is far too much of an invasion of privacy, but people in support of drones think it's the most accurate.
Edward Snowden was a whistleblower on the U.S. government. He worked for a private security company, and when he was able to steal nearly 1.5 million documents, this was the beginning of basically a revolution of mass surveillance. In June 2013, Edward Snowden released his first document, and since then, there have been nearly 7,000 more documents released that he has entrusted to journalists who do it for him. And obviously, if there's 1.5 million documents out there, and he's only released 7,000, there's obviously room for more to come out and more to be released about the U.S. government's mass surveillance techniques. The most important news that came out of these documents was the program called PRISM, and this slide is one of the slides that he released. And basically, what PRISM is it's the way that U.S. government mass surveils the U.S. public. Basically, what you have are two types of surveillance methods, and the first being upstream, which is collection of communications on fiber cables and infrastructure as data flows past, and PRISM, which is collection directly from the servers of these U.S. service providers of Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Paltalk, AOL, Skype, YouTube, and Apple. Basically, all your big companies that deal with data of customers and U.S. citizens. And what this allows them to do is see all of your records and know pretty much everything about you. This is a video of Edward Snowden. This was taken around the time that he released all these documents. This is filmed in Hong Kong.
Does it target the actions of Americans?
NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can, by any means possible, that it believes on the grounds of sort of a self-certification that they serve the national interest. Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. And to do that, the NSA specifically, targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, simply because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
One of the
Okay, so basically he's just saying they can target anybody they want at any time. And so what these leaks have really helped to do have brought awareness about mass surveillance to the U.S. public. Currently, Snowden has asylum in Russia, and he just renewed it in 2017, and he can now stay there until 2020. He's obviously still wanted by the U.S. government, and there have been talks that Trump and Putin will reach a deal for Snowden as a sign of kind of peace between Russia and the U.S. What really came about because of the Snowden leak was the USA Freedom Act signed into law in 2015 by President Obama. And basically what this does is repeals some of the more unconstitutional aspects of the Patriot Act. For example, they can no longer do bulk collection of records. The bulk collection prohibition is strengthened by prohibiting large-scale indiscriminate collection, such as all records from an entire state, city, or zip code, and it allows challenges of national security letter gag orders, which are basically subpoenas for just your information.
The Patriot Act, which stands for Uniting and Strengthening America by Providing Appropriate Tools Required to Intercept and Obstruct Terrorism, was signed into law in 2001 post 9/11 by President George Bush. Its main purpose being to deter and punish terrorist acts in the United States and around the world, to enhance law enforcement investigator tools, and for other purposes. The act overall enabled the government to collect intel from all Americans, classify the dangerous ones, and proceed from there. It has many pros and cons. Some of the pros being ease of surveillance for the government, being able to monitor the people and depict what is dangerous information. Also, it assists law enforcement in making cases as well as finding people that they are searching for. In many scenarios, such as airports and public places, it increases security measures, preventing effects more quickly and providing safety to citizens. But as a con, though, many people feel that it gives too much authority to the government and can lead to unlawful detainment of citizens. Overall, it violates the freedom of many and has led to false accusations of citizens, leading them to believe that it deteriorates away from their rights.
The United States Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court was a court established and authorized under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978. It's also known as FISA. They oversee requests of surveillance warrants against foreign spies inside the United States by federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Such requests are made most often by the National Security Agency and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Its powers have evolved to the point that it has been also known as a parallel of the Supreme Court. The court is housed in a room in a windowless and secure area of the U.S. District Court on the Constitution Avenue. Government sources say it's a courtroom with judges' bench, tables for lawyers, and support staff. The court is made up of 11 judges who sit for 7-year terms, and they're all federal district judges who agree to take on the additional duties on a rotating basis. They are appointed by the Chief Justice John Roberts without any supplemental confirmation from the other 2 branches of government. Roberts has named every member of the court, as well as a separate 3-judge panel to hear appeals known as the Court of Review. The FISA Court's larger mission is to decide whether to grant certain types of government requests, wiretapping, data analysis, and other monitoring of foreign intelligence purposes of the suspected terrorists and spies operating in the United States. The FISA Amendments Act of 2008 provides critically important authority for the U.S. intelligence community to acquire foreign intelligence information by targeting foreign persons reasonably believed to be outside the United States. The Act also ensures that the intelligence community has the flexibility and agility it needs to identify and respond to terrorists and other foreign threats to our security. The Act provides a key role for each branch of government, which assigns responsibilities jointly to the Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence to ensure that the nation's chief law enforcement and intelligence officials work together in collecting foreign intelligence in accordance with the law. Furthermore, it requires the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, the FISA Court, to review and approve or order modifications to procedures required by the Act and to ensure that these procedures are consistent with the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. However, many argue that the FISA Amendments Act are unconstitutional. The FISA Amendments Act allows the mass acquisition of U.S. citizens and residents' international communications. Although the Act prohibits the government from intentionally targeting people inside the U.S., it places virtually no restrictions on the government's targeting of people outside the U.S., even of those targeting our communications with U.S. citizens and residents. The law effect, and indeed the law's main purpose, is to give the government nearly unfettered access to Americans' international communications.
One prior court case regarding mass surveillance is the case Jewell v. NSA. This case was filed against the NSA for the surveillance of millions of ordinary Americans. The course began when an AT&T employee provided documents showing that AT&T sends routed copies of internet traffic to a secret room in San Francisco controlled by the NSA. In addition, a few NSA employees acted as whistleblowers and provided more information. The court originally dismissed the case, claiming it violated the state secrecy privilege, but it was reopened later. However, the court did not rule upon the constitutionality of the case, but it was a step in the right direction for the fight against the NSA. Another court case regarding mass surveillance is the case Clapper v. Amnesty. This case was filed in 2012, challenging a provision made to the FISA Act. This provision of the FISA Act creates new procedures for authorizing government electronic surveillance of non-U.S. persons outside the U.S. for foreign intelligence purposes. The plaintiff claimed that this new provision violates the First and Fourth Amendment, as well as Article 3 of the Constitution. The case resulted in a 5-4 ruling in favor of the plaintiff, stating that the new provision does not have standing under Article 3 of the Constitution because no injuries had occurred. Associate Chief Justice Samuel Alito remanded for further proceedings.
We now know through the Snowden revelations that the US and UK intelligence agencies have been operating indiscriminate mass surveillance programs on a global scale, enabling the interception of a large proportion of the world's internet traffic, as well as the phone communications of hundreds of millions of people. These capabilities are coupled with vast intelligence sharing practices between members of the Five Eyes Alliance, as well as with a web of intelligence agencies in dozens of countries around the world. These are some of the programs run by the NSA and GCHQ that have been revealed since 2013. Governments can have legitimate reasons for using communications surveillance, for example, to combat crime or protect national security. However, because surveillance interferes with the rights to privacy and freedom of expression, it must be done in accordance with strict criteria. Surveillance must be targeted based on reasonable suspicion, undertaken in accordance with the law, necessary to meet a legitimate aim, and be conducted in a manner that is proportionate to that aim and non-discriminatory. This means that mass surveillance that indiscriminately collects the communications of large numbers of people cannot be justified. Mass surveillance violates both the right to privacy and to freedom of expression. Companies, including Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, were forced to hand over their customers' data under secret orders through the NSA's PRISM program. The NSA recorded, stored, and analyzed metadata related to every single telephone call and text message transmitted in Mexico, Kenya, and the Philippines. GCHQ and the NSA have cooped some of the world's largest telecommunications companies to tap the transatlantic undersea cables and intercept the private communications they carry under their respective tempora and upstream programs. GCHQ and NSA hacked into the internal computer network of Gemalto, the largest manufacturer of SIM cards in the world, possibly stealing billions of encryption keys used to protect the privacy of mobile phone communications around the world. Hopefully this presentation will help you form and create a more informed opinion on the issue of mass surveillance in the United States. Thanks for watching.